And we've been looking at them for 2 years, trying to figure out what we're going to do to, you know, to address rates for the next 5 years. Long-term power contracts, rate adjustments, if any, those type of things. So we're looking out long periods, I mean 50 years of contracts, things like that that aren't day-to-day, but these different pieces play into money and when you can lay out this project or that project. Those type of things then allow, or kind of give guidance to that day-to-day operation.
But those types of decisions that you just outlined, if I understand correctly, are not decisions that you make today to implement tomorrow. They're decisions that you think through strategically, and so if it meant, hey, as an advisory board, here's our plan, here's where we think contracts should go and how they should be handled, and that was brought before council in some sort of discussion, I mean, I guess when I think of day-to-day, I think of decisions Jeff makes, everybody makes day-to-day. I'm trying to get my arms around what you think would change other than not having to have a collaboration between council and the advisory board or whatever we determine. What would change in just the daily, what you do today?
There's only two things that would change. On a daily basis, I assume if it was purely advisory, then I'm guessing that the purchasing power of the electric director would revert. And that would change his ability to purchase poles for a project or a new, smaller transformer. These type of things, sure, could be longer term, could not be in the case of the price chopper that Larry brought up. We're lucky that transformer didn't go. If it did, that was 2 months.
Yeah, I do want to.
But that's more of a.
If you don't mind, just a moment. I've heard this story before. I mean, I heard this story a couple of years ago. I've heard it several times since. And I know that Stuart Fairburn said that he was going to have to take that to council. But as it turns out, based on the city's purchasing policy, he didn't have to bring it to council. He chose to bring it to council.
Because it's under
So-
emergency provisions.
Because there's emergency provisions that now, this happened to be back when Bill was still a contractor, so it was still back in the keep or sell times. Maybe Stuart wasn't so inclined to go out and spend $25,000 or $30,000, whatever it was, when he was trying to keep that money safe, hoping to pawn those problems off on KCP&L. But at the end of the day, if Stuart if Bill had made a case to Stuart that was compelling enough, and Stuart had a little courage on his own, he would have been able to make that purchase and not have to go to council. He chose to take it to council because it was over the $15,000 level. But he didn't see it as an emergency, or at least not to the extent that he shouldn't take it to council first.
I don't think the decision between an independent board and advisory really rests with day-to-day issues, or even the emergency. It rests with the outcome of the BPU Investigation Committee's findings, that they found unanimously that city council is not the best group to make those type of
Okay,
decisions.
but wait a second. When did they find that out?
In
When-
2002, when we presented it?
In 2008?
No, 2002 is when that committee presented.
No, we presented in March of 2012.
Oh, sorry, did I say 8? Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
you said 2008 and then 2000.
Okay, that's the BPU committee, but I guess what I'm saying is, all these ills that you keep, talking about were with a previous council. I mean, there's not one person that was on that council.
But I
And
can't
so-
guarantee who's going to be on the next
That-
council.
Well,
that's a concern.
True, but we
Yeah.
can't guarantee who's going to be appointed either to the board. So what's the difference? I mean, it's not like you
Well,
guys...
that's a little
have
bit more
any-
control.
I'm sorry?
You have a little bit more control over appointments.
Not really. I mean, the mayor appoints, and if we can't find any fault with you, I guess we confirm.
4 out of 5 original
I have a-
UUB members are gone. Burns out there, he was an original
So-
member, but
Yes.
he took his leave a couple of years ago.
So there's nothing that prevents you from ending up with a bunch of people that don't know what they're doing. again, the institutional knowledge, not saying that 5 years, having been on the board is not worth something, but in the end, what I think is happening here is you guys have a role reversal. I mean, really, you should be making those committee decisions, maybe through input from citizens who complain about the rates being too high, maybe from input from the EDC who says the business rates are too high. You should take them to Bill, just as we discussed the committees did with Jeff in Parks and Rec, and then Bill should present those to the council. I mean, that's how that's why I think there's some disagreement about this ordinance, is because it seems like Bill gives you information, which he knows better than anybody, and then you bless it, and then you don't want any input from the council. And that's just not the way it should work. It should work in that advisory capacity.
Other than Bill doing the presentation, that's pretty much how the information flows already.
Well, then what objection would you have to having Bill make the presentation to us and us deciding if you spend $40,000, which currently
Well,
is against the policy manual?
I know, Larry, you're not going to get it back under city council control.
Well, I'm not saying that I have to have the whole enchilada under city council control. I'm just saying that, and as a compromise, I'm agreeing to not abolishing the board, but making it an advisory, giving it an advisory capacity, which I think is what we all agreed on 3 weeks ago.
I think we've got a consensus to go that way if that's the way that we want to go, and whatever the future holds can be decided later, because as it turns out, I didn't make a compelling enough case for doing a BPU at this point.
Chris, let me ask, and Laura, I'm sorry to call on you at the end of class, I know, but I think there's been a lot of concern about what the big difference in the way the monies are managed and the budget is managed with the new verbiage. How drastic of a difference is it really going to be from the money management, the separation of funds, the management of the emergency fund that they've built up, those things? I think that's been a concern that keeps coming up, but we haven't addressed.
We've never bothered their emergency fund. It's still completely intact. Utility funds are always separate from the general fund and always have been. So we're already keeping electric separate from water, separate from sewer, separate from general. Always have been. I think what I'm hearing them say, frankly speaking, is they don't like that the governing body agreed to restructure some of the way we were taking revenues before with the penalties and the reconnect, because that impacted their budget.
Right, and I think a lot of that comes back to the communication question, and
Well-
that's something that will be resolved moving forward. I think we've all learned that there needs to be a little bit different way that's...
It could be resolved to a point, but
Right.
but I can't go back in time
No.
and give them more warning once you all gave me a
No,
different
absolutely not.
instruction
And
on
no,
something.
and no
So
one
I-
asked that, but with the way it is now, I mean, the way that the budget managed isn't going to be that different in the advisory role that it has been in the way that's done now, if that's the way we go.
If you do it, if they were to participate in the budget structure as the same way as all other departments, they would be involved from start to finish, starting in January or February, when we all begin meeting in that room and talk about budget needs presented by the directors versus budget needs as the city as a whole, and decisions are made for a single point of conflict resolution. And that's the way every other department in this city runs.
Well, and let me just add, because and this is probably a discussion, but, I hear a lot of feedback, the fear that council's going to take money from the electorate to subsidize other activities, what have you. But the fact of the matter is, let's be frank, the benefit of owning your own utility is one of two things. Either you control rates and have flexibility and choose to invest or not, or you reinvest the money from that utility somewhere in the community. It's on the video that we talked about. So I don't know that should necessarily be looked at as a bad thing. If that's the decision, because that's what is felt to be best, that is the benefit of owning your own utility.
Well, that's the whole point of the pilot. That's the whole point of that transfer mechanism, is to do exactly what you're talking about, which is to bring funds into the general fund to be dispersed in other areas of the city budget.
Or
you know.
take those funds and lower the rates. I mean, those are the
Exactly, one or
discussions
the other.
that need to I mean, and
Well,
those-
which,